You have probably gone through tons of character creation across different games, but how many of them are actually memorable? It's not uncommon that the character creation step of the game just feels like it is in the way of the actual gameplay. Or even if you did enjoy the character creation, it could feel like the impact it had on the actual game's story was obscured or just not there. Well, I saw that problem as an opportunity and decided to fix it on my game. Hi, developer Ezra here, and I'm on a journey to create my first game. I already decided that my game will be a story-driven game. So I started by interviewing a bunch of gamers around me, my friends and acquaintances, to figure out what they think about the narrative games that are already out there. And I found that there is actually a clear satisfaction gap in the narrative game space in regards to creating characters and character development. You might be wondering, so what? Why is character creation so important? As long as the game is fun, isn't that all that matters? I think the character creation and character building is where the player actually gets to tell their story. And that is the goal I'm setting for my narrative game, for the players to feel like they're telling their own story. The game might already have the story decided, like the evil necromancer returns from the dead after hundreds of years and is trying to take over the world, and you, the hero, is the only one who can stop this evil. But the talent, the history of the character that the player is playing, and to get a little bit more meta, the ability for the player to play the mechanic well should decide how the evil is defeated. For example, does your hero beat the evil to pup with just pure strength because that's their background and talent? Or does your hero have superior intellect to trick the necromancer into sealing themselves forever? Or maybe your hero's strength is in the friendship and their friendliness and being able to make friends, and with the power of friendship, they are able to defeat the evil together. And in controlling this how, the player gets to tell their own story and they feel the autonomy. Now, don't get me wrong, the games out there already kind of provide this type of choice in their gameplay, and that's why they're enjoyable. But when it comes to character background and then the character creation, a lot of the choices end up just being a step block. For example, let's say you chose a background where your character is an orphan who had to join a thieves guild to survive. Well, that's a +2 in stealth for you. Or you're from a noble family and you went through a proper military training from that, and that is just +1 in weapon mastery. Just a bunch of numbers. But what if instead of just some numbers that represent your background, the story that you're experiencing and the choices that you're making have a deep connection to your background? So for the case of the orphan thief, instead of just +2 stealth, or in addition to +2 stealth, let's say the necromancer has hired a group of gang to capture you, and then you realize that group is the guild that you left. What unique choices could you have in that situation? I don't know about you, but that sounds like a really fun and enticing gameplay. And that's what I want to make. And with that in mind, I got to designing the game. So I began thinking about the overall structure and the mechanics of the game design with that in mind. How can I make the character creation and the gameplay feel like this story is deeply impacted by the character that the player is building? So I already knew that I wanted to avoid step blocks, so that's one thing out of the way. And even the background choices, I didn't want it to be just a simple word of background, because that doesn't include the history and then the narrative of what actually happened. So for example, you would see in game of Dungeons and Dragons, the background choices might look like an acolyte. I choose an acolyte, I choose a mercenary, and that comes with certain knowledge and that comes with certain stats. But it is up to the player and the DM to actually come up with interesting story, like who did you interact with, what is your flaws from that, and all those things. And I wanted that to be included in the game. And also, I wanted players to be fully aware of what they're making a decision on during the character creation. I know a lot of games where there's a very, very thorough choices in the beginning of making a character, but unless you've already played the game or you've searched the other people playing the game with like Wikipedia search, you don't actually know what kind of impact the choices that you're making in the character creation have in the gameplay. So I was asking myself, is there a narrative device where I could introduce the character's background in the middle of the story? And then it hit me. It was actually pretty simple. Flashbacks. You see it in stories and movies all the time. Characters' past is revisited in full context of what is going on in the narrative right now, so that you don't lose the connection between the history and how it applies to the present. I just absolutely love this idea. I got really excited about what that could mean, how that could play out in my game. I could already imagine what it would look like, the kind of UI on the top of the gameplay with the icons representing players' background that gets filled in as you, the player, have flashbacks. And the flashback gameplay itself will be choice-based, where you figure out who taught you these things, how did you feel about this, so that you actually build the history as part of the gameplay. And not only is it deeply narrative in the context of making the background, but because it comes right before the choice of your current situation, that it is in full context of what's happening, so you don't make decisions that ends up being never used. And without any hesitation, I got straight into prototype building. First, I planned out the layout of the game and then the UI, what it would look like. Then I started learning how to use a game engine. I chose one called Godot out of many choices with no particular reason other than the fact that it was open source. And then I tried to program a dialogue manager, since the narrative game's focus is in that back and forth of the dialogue and the narrative text, to speed up the implementation process. But then shortly after, I gave up on writing it and went onto the internet to see if anyone had already created this. And surely enough, there was already a dialogue manager as an add-on for Godot somebody developed. I'll link the GitHub address to the dialogue manager in the description below. I did have to make a little bit minor changes here and there in order to make it actually work, because the last update was like a year ago. But it sure beat making it myself from scratch. And voila, I have my first prototype. Well, it's in a rough state still. I need some polishing. I need to think about the graphics and all those things. But look, I have a prototype. I have something playable. But more importantly, what do other players think about my game? Well, that's where the testing comes in. I had to get a bunch of players again and have them play and give me feedback, honest feedback, hopefully. And I'll share the responses and what I did with that response on the next video. But meanwhile, please leave a comment down below about what you think about this game idea, and if you have any other opinion on the matter I talked about in this video. And of course, if you're enjoying the type of content I'm creating, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!